Tonight, I don't stand here as someone who has all the answers. I stand here as someone who has felt the silence of lonely nights, the weight of unanswered questions, and the quiet search for something real. Life has a strange way of testing us. It pushes us through loss, through doubt, through moments where we question our own worth. And somewhere along that road, we begin to wonder if peace is even meant for us or if it's just a story we tell ourselves to survive. But then someone walks into your life, not with fireworks, not with noise, just presence. And suddenly the chaos inside you doesn't roar as loudly. The storms don't disappear, but they don't control you anymore. 'Cause in the simplest way possible, your heart recognizes something it has been searching for all along. This speech is about that moment. The moment when love doesn't feel like a battle, when connection doesn't feel like fear, when for the first time your soul whispers, "My heart found its peace with you." I used to think peace was a destination, somewhere far away, somewhere you aren't after surviving enough storms. I thought it would come with certainty, with answers, with a life that finally makes sense. I believed peace would arrive when the noise stopped, when the doubts quieted down, when the past no longer echoed so loudly in my chest. But that's not how it happened. For a long time, my heart felt like a battlefield. Not dramatic, not loud, just tired. Tired of pretending to be strong. Tired of carrying memories that didn't ask for permission before staying. Tired of smiling in rooms where I felt invisible. I learned how to function. I learned how to move forward. I learned how to tell myself that this is just how life is. You wake up, you survive, you sleep, you repeat. And somewhere in between all of that, you build walls, not because you hate the world, but because you're trying to protect what's left of you. I became good at that. Good at being independent. Good at not needing anyone. Good at convincing myself that love was beautiful in stories, but complicated in reality. I told myself that if I never leaned on anyone, I would never fall. If I never opened the door completely, no one could walk out and take pieces of me with them. It sounds strong. It feels safe, but it's lonely. And loneliness doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. It sits next to you while you're surrounded by people. It shows up at night when the world goes quiet. It asks questions you don't want to answer. It reminds you that being strong and being at peace are not the same thing. Then you walked into my life. Not like a rescue, not like a miracle, just quietly. You didn't promise me forever. You didn't try to fix me. You didn't ask me to become someone else. You just showed up, and somehow that was louder than any grand gesture I had ever seen. At first I didn't trust it. I didn't trust you. Not because you gave me a reason not to, but because my heart had learned to expect the temporary. It had memorized the pattern of almost love, almost commitment, almost understanding, almost staying. So I watched you from a distance. Even when you were close, I noticed the way you listened, really listened. Not waiting for your turn to speak, not trying to impress, just present. I noticed the way you respected my silence instead of trying to fill it. The way you asked about my day and meant it. The way you looked at me like I wasn't a project to fix, but a person to understand. And something inside me began to shift. It wasn't fireworks, it wasn't a sudden realization. It was subtle, like the first light before sunrise. You don't notice it immediately, but slowly, the darkness loses its grip. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to perform. I didn't feel like I had to be the strongest version of myself every second. I could be tired. I could be uncertain. I could admit that some days are heavier than others. And you didn't run. That's when I understood something I had been missing my whole life. Peace isn't the absence of problems. It's the presence of someone who doesn't become one. With you, my heart didn't have to be on guard. It didn't have to prepare for impact. It didn't have to rehearse goodbye before even saying hello. It could just exist. There's something powerful about being accepted in your most unfiltered state. No mask, no armor, no carefully constructed version of yourself. Just you, flawed human still healing. You saw the parts of me I tried to hide. The insecurities, the overthinking, the moments where I retreat into myself because that's what I've always done. And instead of pulling away, you stepped closer. Not forcefully, not aggressively, just enough to let me know I wasn't alone there. And slowly, the battlefield inside me grew quiet. Not because life became easier, it didn't. We still had challenges, we still had misunderstandings, we still had moments where the world felt heavy. But there was a difference. I wasn't carrying it. alone anymore. Love with you wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it didn't demand attention, it was steady, it was patient, it was the kind of love that sits next to you in silence and makes that silence feel safe instead of awkward. I started to realize that my heart wasn't racing out of fear anymore. It wasn't bracing itself for disappointment. It wasn't analyzing every word, searching for hidden meanings. It was calm. And calm was unfamiliar. At first, I mistook it for boredom because I had been conditioned to think love had to be intense to be real. That chaos meant passion, that uncertainty meant depth. But with you, love felt simple, honest, clear. There were no games, no tests, no emotional puzzles to solve, just two people choosing each other. That choice, that daily quiet decision to stay, that's where the peace came from. You didn't just love me when I was shining. You loved me when I was unsure, when I was distant, when I was wrestling with my own thoughts. You didn't take my healing personally. You didn't rush my process. You understood that loving someone means giving them room to breathe. And in that space, my heart exhaled. I didn't realize how tense I had been for years, how much energy it takes to constantly protect yourself, how heavy it feels to always expect the worst. Being with you was like setting down a weight I didn't even know I was carrying. There's a certain kind of freedom in knowing someone sees your scars and doesn't flinch, in knowing your past doesn't scare them, in knowing your vulnerability isn't a weakness in their eyes. With you, I didn't feel like I had to earn love. I didn't feel like I had to prove my worth every day. You made it clear through actions, not just words, that I was enough as I am. That kind of love changes you, not in a way that erases who you were, but in a way that softens the edges, in a way that reminds you that you deserve tenderness too. My heart found its peace with you. Not because you completed me, but because you accepted me. Not because you saved me, but because you stood beside me while I saved myself. There's strength in that, a quiet strength. We live in a world that glorifies intensity, that celebrates loud declarations and dramatic love stories. But the real magic I've learned is inconsistency. In waking up every day and choosing to care and checking in small gestures, in shared glances that say more than words ever could. Peace is knowing that when the day ends, there's someone who understands the language of your silence. Peace is being able to disagree without fearing abandonment. Peace is laughing over nothing and feeling like it's everything. Peace is knowing that love doesn't have to hurt to be real. Before you, I thought love required sacrifice of self. I thought it meant shrinking in certain areas to fit into someone else's expectations. I thought compromise meant losing pieces of who I was. But with you, I grew. You encouraged my dreams. You respected my boundaries. You celebrated my individuality instead of competing with it. And in doing that, you showed me that love isn't about possession. It's about partnership. There were nights we talked for hours about fears we had never shared with anyone else. Not because we were trying to impress each other, but because we felt safe enough to be honest. There were days we said nothing extraordinary, just existed side by side, and somehow that felt profound. I began to trust again, not just you, myself. I trusted that if something felt calm and steady, it didn't mean it was temporary. I trusted that I didn't have to sabotage something good just because I wasn't used to it. I trusted that peace wasn't a trap, and that trust was a gift, and that trust was a gift. Loving you didn't make me lose myself. It helped me find parts of myself I had forgotten. The softer parts, the hopeful parts, the parts that still believed in connection despite everything. When I say my heart found peace with you, I don't mean that everything became perfect. We still make mistakes. We still have moments of misunderstanding. We are human. But even in those moments, there's a foundation of respect, a foundation of care. We fight to understand, not to win. We listen to respond, not to defend. We apologize without ego. And in a world where pride often ruins what love builds, that matters. You taught me that love doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. It doesn't have to be complicated to be meaningful. Sometimes it's just about being there fully, authentically, without an exit plan in your back pocket. I used to prepare for endings even when things were just beginning. With you, I started planning futures instead. Not because I was certain of what tomorrow would bring, but because for the first time, the idea of tomorrow didn't scare me. There's something sacred about finding someone who feels like home. Not in a possessive way, not in a way that limits your world, but in a way that expands it. Home isn't a place, it's a feeling. It's the sense of belonging without having to negotiate your existence. And with you, I belong. Not because you claimed me, but because you claimed me. But because you understand me, you understand that some days I'll need space. Some days I'll need reassurance. Some days I'll be strong. Some days I won't. And through all of that, you remain steady. That steadiness is what quieted the storms inside me. I don't look at love the same way anymore. I don't chase intensity. I don't romanticize chaos. I don't confuse anxiety with passion. I value peace. I value the way your presence lowers my defenses instead of raising them. I value the way you look at me like I'm not too much and not too little, just enough. I value the way we can sit in silence without feeling the need to fill it. My heart found its peace with you because you didn't demand it. You didn't force it. You allowed it to arrive naturally. And in that natural unfolding, I discovered something I had been searching for without even knowing it had a name. A love that feels like breathing. A connection that feels like truth. A presence that feels like calm after years of noise. You didn't silence my past. You didn't erase my scars. But you showed me that they don't define my future. You showed me that love can be patient. That it can be kind without being weak. That it can be strong without being harsh. And in learning to love you, I learned to love myself in ways I never thought possible. So when I say my heart found its peace with you, I'm not speaking from fantasy. I'm speaking from experience. From nights of overthinking that slowly turned into nights of restful sleep. From days of doubt that slowly turned into days of quiet confidence. From a life that felt like constant survival to a life that finally feels like living. And that peace isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. Doesn't demand applause. It doesn't demand applause. It just exists. Steady, present, real. It exists in the way you reach for my hand without thinking. In the way you check if I got home safe. In the way you remember small details about things I mentioned once and thought you forgot. It exists in the way we face the world together. Not as two halves desperately clinging to each other, but as two whole people choosing to walk side by side. That choice is everything, because love isn't about losing yourself in someone else. It's about finding a rhythm where both hearts beat freely without fear. And with you, my heart beats freely. Not racing from anxiety, not pounding from uncertainty, just steady, just calm, just at peace with you. In the quiet space where love doesn't need to prove itself, where presence is enough, where the world can be chaotic and uncertain. But inside this connection, there is a stillness that feels like truth. A stillness that feels like coming home after a long journey. A stillness that reminds me every day that no matter how loud life becomes, no matter how heavy the past once felt, there is a place where my heart can rest without fear, without armor, without pretending to be anything other than what it is. And in that resting, in that gentle and unwavering calm, I continue to choose you. And in choosing you, I continue to choose the peace I once thought was impossible. The peace I once searched for in distant places. The peace I now find in your presence, in your voice, in your steady heartbeat beside mine. And in this quiet, unshaken certainty that love can be soft and still be strong, can be simple and still be deep, can be calm and still change everything inside a once restless heart that no longer feels the need to